Hey y'all. Hey y'all, welcome to the Octavia Butler mixtape course. Y'all, we are discussing Butler's Adulthood Rites today. How y'all doing? Let me know if y'all can see and hear me properly, correctly. Let me know if y'all can see and hear me. We are in part 2 of Adulthood Rites today. We are quickly approaching the end of Butler's Lilith's Brood or Xenogenesis trilogy, and I hope you all have been enjoying it, right? Let me see. What do I got? Next week we start Imago, so if you do want to follow along in the course, look at the syllabus, the discussion breakdown for that, and we start Imago next week. Don't forget, y'all, after Imago, we did take a vote last week that we will be reading Fledgling after Imago. So we're going to take a week break after we finish Imago, and then we're going to start Fledgling for 2 weeks, and then we're going to hit the short stories in 1 week, and then the Butler course has come to an end. So that'll take us, I think, into August, if my calculations are correct, right? We'll be in August. We'll end around August. I am going to drop a Substack post on the free side tonight. I know I usually do not drop posts on Wednesday nights, but I did want to kind of circle back on some things that we've been talking about and thinking about, especially linking these 2 books with Ronald Reagan, Donald Trump, and some of Butler's thoughts from her archive. If y'all do want to, come up, y'all know what to do. If y'all want to come up here and kiki and chat, hit the 2 people at the bottom. Let's go ahead and get more people on the panel. So in the meantime, as we wait for more people to come on, please keep liking this video. Tap, 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 tap. I'm actually going to read from a book, Gary Canavan's Octavia Butler. So I'm not going to read directly from Butler's interviews tonight. I'm going to read 2 to 3 paragraphs, 2.5 paragraphs from Gary Canavan's book of scholarship on Butler. Thank you for the gift. Who is that? Valerie, you always get me right. Thank you so much. And I think, actually, Valerie, I think you're going to appreciate the passages that I'm going to read out of Gary Canavan's book tonight. So I'm going to read a little bit out of here. Put your listening ears on, your thinking cap on, and then we'll hop into Adulthood Rites. I do want more people to come and join Tina and I up here. We can't just be the only ones up here. Share your thoughts, what you think. Y'all basically Butler scholars. You know what I'm saying? All right, so let me hop on into it. This is Gary Canavan's Octavia Butler. I think it was published 2013, if I'm not mistaken. I'm probably lying about that. 2016. Let me get this guest pulled up here. And it says, we're going to start with the Owain breeding program, and I'm going to read into it. So let's just think about it a little bit. It says the Owain breeding project also closely mimics eliminationist and eugenic discourses in ways that the text of the novel does not foreground. And even Lilith herself does not take up, likely because she has no choice but to go along with their plans. The Owain chosen candidates for awakening are all healthy, under 50, English speaking, as my students are more and more prone to noticing. They are all apparently straight and cisgender, or perhaps more sinisterly, some have been subtly altered by the Owain so that they are straight and cisgender now. The Owain vision of the future may be less sexist and less racist than our present, but it is more homophobic and transphobic, with a sort of compulsory heteronormativity that sees both the backward-looking reactionary male humans and their Owain captors agreeing that all the humans are to pair off in monogamous heterosexual couples in order to have children. It is also much more ableist than our present, with the Owain specifically refusing to allow certain types of bodies, conditions, and genetic predispositions to Hold on. Valerie, I'm going to mute you. Let's see, where was I? I'm going to start over in that sentence. It is also much more ableist than our present, with the Owain specifically refusing to allow certain types of bodies, conditions, and genetic predispositions to persist into the future, even with respect to Tate Huntington's disease in the Martian colony project they refuse to participate in and will not control. In the second book, even the action that is almost always pointed to as Oankali benefits, the establishment of the fourth Oankali division, the Akagi, control group of unchanged humans to be left on Mars, is structurally identical to the 19th century project of Indian removal in the Americas, in which an indigenous population was displaced by colonizing invaders and moved to less desirable locations the invaders didn't want. And even this meager concession comes because the Oankali essentially have no choice after Aiken, a character variously described in Butler's notes as the Martin Luther. Oh, y'all. Somebody keep trying to call me. Let me put this on focus. Sorry. So Aiken is commonly referred to as the Martin Luther King Jr. or the Diane Fossey of the Oankali force is the issue. And this is the last sentence. The last paragraph I'm going to read. As Rebecca J. Holden notes, the Oankali assertion of the constitutive flaw in the human genome that leaves human beings intrinsically unfit to govern themselves, an assertion for which they never provide even the slimmest evidence, but which appeals to familiar discourses on both the political left and political right that calls it to be accepted by many readers without argument, is only the latest version of the familiar lie to any student of colonial and imperial history. It is structurally no different than the call to bring civilization to the barbarians that loose centuries of war, rape, genocide, and theft, or the ubiquitous claim even now that peoples of Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East are somehow unfit to govern themselves, a claim that cannot be divorced from attempts to exploit these people and places for their resources, biological and otherwise. I think this is a fair read that Canavan gave on the Xenogenesis books, but also on what the Oankali are doing, on the gender dynamics, on the sexuality dynamics in the text. Hold on, what is that? Okay. And so I found it fascinating, right, that he basically picked up on the things that Butler was interested in addition to Reagan economics. One thing that I do want to point out, which is going to point to the Substack post that I'm going to be dropping today or later tonight after we finish this call, is that Gabe is a embodiment of sorts of Ronald Reagan for Butler. The ways in which she describes him in her notes, the ways in which he shows up in the text, Butler is basically using him as a model for Ronald Reagan. And so I'm going to be pointing to that on the Substack on the free side tonight, before I drop the discussion questions tomorrow on Imago. All right, y'all. If anyone else wants to come up here, please come up here. Let's get these likes up to 10,000 tonight if we can, maybe more. But if not, Valerie, Tina, hey, what y'all got? What y'all think? Valerie, Tina, y'all here?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was losing the button.
Oh,
I had a discussion with my husband about this book.
okay.
And what I said to him was one of the things about this that is frustrating but was disturbingly true was, they got a chance to restart new villages, new situations, all of this kind of stuff. And they went back to doing guns and kidnapping women. I'm just like, they went back to guns and kidnapping women.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there was no okay, these are people who know they need medicine. These are not like primitive people who don't understand, who don't know, who don't understand any of this kind of stuff. And it seemed like for them, the most important thing was, I got bored because I couldn't have kids. All of a sudden, men want kids all the time. I'm whatever. So it was like, what is happening?
Yes.
I just felt like that was just like why is it that way? Like you guys found a place that you could salvage, you could bring, all these metals or whatever, you could do all of these things, and your first thought was not just the people who were in Phoenix, but the people who were, you know I guess going from village to village. It just, I don't know, it was really, it was like you have like, that there is biology, that there's science, that there are these things, and you're not going out looking for that, or looking for people who had that prior knowledge, or trying to figure out how we can use plants and stuff for medicinal purposes, and how do we do this better. It just seemed
Right.
like, and I'm sorry, not to defend offend any Christians, but the whole thing about we gonna remember the Bible and make up a pseudo Bible, I was very disappointed.
You know what's interesting about one, I'm Christian. No shade. I think
Yeah.
critically about my faith all the time. I know you're a believer. But I like that point that you just brought up, because this is about interpretation of the Bible. And it reminds me of today in politics, right? Everyone, we're reading, the people who are believers, we're reading the same text, the interpretation is drastically different, and we're creating laws and around a flawed interpretation, or around a supremacist interpretation, of this ancient holy historical book. And so it kind of points to today in a lot of ways, right, Tina, when you say it like that.
Yeah.
But also thinking about the guns, right? Thinking about, I saw someone in the chat say the Owen colleague were right. In a way, yes, right? If you of course, the Owen colleague's claim is that you all are so destructive that you are willing to destroy anything just because you have this destructive nature about you. And as a result of them not being able to procreate, they turn to destruction. They turn to abusing women. They turn to this, and it brings just back up that human contradiction that Butler is pointing to, but that Canavan is pushing back against in the parts that I read at the beginning of class. When he's saying there is no real evidence that this contradiction really exists, it reminds you of the narrative that we must Christianize, or we must. Am I good over here? Because the system is telling me I'm choppy. Am I coming through clear?
You're a little choppy.
I'm still choppy. I'm good.
It's better now.
Okay. So maybe I was choppy at one point. But the critique that you have to civilize the barbarians, and so in a way, I do kind of see how the Owen Collie can be the colonizers, who are trying to wipe out an entire race of people by breeding with them, right? By building upon the best parts of them, and removing the worst parts, or discarding the parts of them they don't like, to create a different type of race. So I do kind of see that critique that Canavan is bringing up. However, I do see your critique too, Tina. I do. What the rest of the people got? What y'all got? Is that you, Dr. Dente, in there in the chat? Yash, Valerie, Shanandi, what y'all got?
Uh, I'm actually still trying to finish it, but it's
Okay.
fine. I'm at like the part where Akin is in metamorphosis and just healed Tate. Yes, that's her name. But I don't mind the spoilers because I know I'm pretty close. I know the only thing I had to say is what I put into the Substack chat is
Mm-hmm.
when I was on the part of Phoenix. I don't know, whichever part it was in chapter 15,
Okay.
Phoenix. And I was getting vibes of um, cultural appropriation with how the way of the Anankli are just taking. And I mean, they're big on trade and everything,
Mm-hmm.
but from um, Akin revealing that what they're actually going to do is take everything and all of the genetic material, and
Mm-hmm.
then the little low home is going to leave Earth and leave Earth just a shell of itself and basically dead afterwards, it completely changed my perspective on the Anakli. Because I was like, at first I was like, oh, I'm so on board with these guys. I love everything about them. I like the whole like unity aspects of them and like the value in life. But then to go from one planet and steal all their genetic material and then just leave it dead,
Mhm.
it made me look at them more critically. And that was definitely the shoe that was going to drop that I was waiting for. Because like there can't be something for me to enjoy about these people. But and then other than that, the things that made me extremely uncomfortable throughout was the blatant themes of like racism and treating the others with how the humans would react to the Anakli. It just disgusted me because it's just like it's just pure hatred for the other that we still view and experience in our world. And I'm glad Tina spoke up on the Bible part because I thought that was weird. I was like, oh, wow, of course the Bible is going to be recreated. And out of all the books they could have memorized and recreated, they chose the Bible. I mean, why not, like, I don't know, the Buddhist teachings or something like that, or anything else that never, like, caused this weird warring and whatnot.
Yeah, I totally get that, and I really appreciate you bringing up the Mars part, right? The promise of Mars, especially in the moment that we're in right now, where people are trying to go to Mars and rid themselves of the Earth problems. I'm always thinking about how they could have, right? The Oankali did not have to colonize Earth, right? They did not have to strip the land of its resources or the people of their home. They could have started over on Mars, but they didn't want to. So now, as they said in the text, like the Oankali ain't going nowhere. You all can go if you want to. You're going to have to start over. It's going to be hard. You're not going to have anything. You won't even have any materials to build with because you will be altered slightly, but you will not have any notion of home. And I'm always thinking about that in relation to Black people's relationship with home and belonging, and how also, to your point, Valerie, the ways in which indigenous colonies, indigenous communities were displaced, right? As Canavan kind of mentions here, people were removed off their land in order to benefit the colonial rule. Um, yeah, it's hard. In a way, I know we were last week, we're like, oh, this is good. This is interesting, right? And in Dawn, we were like, okay, maybe this could work. But now we're at the end of this and we're seeing the effects of it and how short-sighted the Oankali really are, right? Who said this in the chat? They was going to leave Aiken. I think Benji's mom, they were going to leave Akin, as my audible says, to the resistors as an experiment. And then they realized, oh, we've gone too far. This experiment did not work. Not only did it hurt the experiment itself, Akeem, but it also hurt the Oankali community as a whole. Diana, thanks, Diana, for saying that in the chat. Are there any redeeming qualities of the Oankali at this point? Well, let me rephrase that. The ones who are on Earth, not the ones who are on the ship.
I think it's the same. I think that what she did for me brilliantly was basically show two sides of the same coin. So I'm so disgusted with humanity's chance and their actions, but I'm also very disgusted with their own Onkali and what they were doing when they basically left. When like from the very beginning, they knew they were not going to keep Earth, and
Mhm.
that they kept using the and Dawn. They kept using the thing about, like, we saved you guys. No, you didn't save us. You basically used us for material so you can extend your life, extend
Yeah,
what it is you coming, because they were out of that. So
yeah.
that, it just became very evident in this book that that was the thing. And I don't know, I felt like both of them have both sides of them just did unbelievable, like you are sitting out to destroy this species called humans. You're setting out one way or the other. You're setting out to destroy it. So either from a human standpoint, you're going back to worrying and doing all of these other kind of like just crazy things when you had a chance to start over and have a different way of living.
Mhm.
And then on the other side, you're basically stripping, um, stripping everything from these humans. You're like, they're not going to be human. There's no such thing. There's just not going to be any perpetuation of that.
Mhm. Mhm. And then and I think that now we have the hybrid body speaking more, right? We learn more about a king, we learn more about his politics, and as Canavan pointed out in Butler's notes, that he is referred to as the Martin Luther King Jr. Of the text, right? This figure that at one point in his life was trying to bridge two groups of people together. Yeah, you got some.
Um, yeah, I just wanted to say that I find it really interesting that in the end, the humans was getting ready to burn the house that Akeem was in down. And I asked this question last week, like, does Butler really like people? Because every group of humans that she writes about is like is like extremely violent, and it's almost to the point where I can't even believe her when she says like, "Oh, we're intelligent and we're hierarchical." I don't believe that Butler believes that we were intelligent. I think that she just thinks that we were closed minded and small minded and unable to change. But I think, like, I don't know, this book kind of made all of the Butler books kind of click to me.
Mm.
Like, and then it made me think about the parable series, because Lauren's thing was that God is changed, but then the caveat to that was that she said that kindness eases change. And I feel like if the Owen Collie were just honest about what they were doing, or like, I don't know, more forthcoming about what they were doing, it would be easier for them to get what they want out of the groups of people, instead of it being like, oh, I asked too many questions, now you're just going to be quiet, or I asked the wrong question, so now you're just going to put me back to sleep, or whatever. Like, I think that the Owen colleague, I, I think that they could learn a thing or two.
Okay. Okay, I'm with you there. And when you do read the entire Butler canon, certain themes do arise, and you have these persistent questions. As E. Johnson says, I haven't seen any healthy relationships really. I think ultimately, at the heart of Butler's characters is that humans are pretty cruel. You know what I mean? And maybe she is drudging up the worst parts of humanity and bringing it to the surface. But we're complex. We're complex, and we're living in complex times. And I think that when we have to hit the cruelness of humanity face on, that is when we're the most repulsed by it. But I do think she is pulling from the worst parts of humanity. And when people are afraid, what will they do? What lengths are they willing to go to preserve themselves? So we are looking at people for the last few books, when we're looking at people in crisis, right? In some way or another, all of the characters we have met have been in crises. Shanadi, Melanie, hey.
Hey, sorry, I kind of lost track of the discussion. I had someone come to my
It's okay.
door. But I did want to say, so far this is my favorite book of the two that we've read in the series. So um for me, I've been trying racking my brain to figure the Owen Collie are not as altruistic as they want to appear, and I was
Mhm.
just trying to figure what their motivation was. And I cheated because I started the other book and I figured it out. I started Imago, and I got to where what their whole reasoning for doing their thing is. So, and it made sense to me. So I am not a fan. I've never been a fan of the Oankali. I even the more I read, the more I really have come to feel like them. Just feel about them just like the humans do. Some of the resistors do.
Okay.
Um, they are, it for me, my notes are filled with this word over and over: colonization, colonization. They're colonizers. They're colonizing, and that's all that I'm getting from this, and it's a difficult read, and I just, they're not altruistic at all. They're not doing this for the good of humanity. They're not trying to preserve. They're literally, as far as I'm concerned, stealing and just being extractive, and just trying to replace humans with their idea of what's best for humans, because for their own selfish reasons.
Yes. I'm glad you read ahead, Shanandi, and didn't spoil it. We will learn a lot in Imago. It will bring everything home. The Owen Collie is sure they are colonizers, 100%. There is no other way. And I know Butler positions them as gene traders, and they do. I'm going to argue both sides. They do give, but they do take a lot, but they do give, but maybe what they take is more valuable than what they give. We can argue about that. I'm really not sure which side that I fall on. But there is some type of exchange in the contact zone. Somebody say something?
No, I was gonna say that I feel like they're traders, yes, but the scales aren't balanced in my estimation. They get more from they get more than what they're giving.
Mm-hmm.
And they're giving things that none of these humans or none of these captives asked for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's
So
true. That's right.
One of the things that bothers me is the word trade, because
Okay.
that implies, because people think about, when you say I'm trading something,
Mm-hmm.
that implies that
exactly.
you come to the table with something that I'm interested in, you have something you're interested in, we make a trade. Sometimes a trade is not equal, but we are both sitting at the table agreeing to do this. That never happened. And so it just bothers me every time I hear that, because that it implements, or it makes you think, oh, some kind of ways that the humans were sitting at a table going, yeah, that was it. Now it'd be different if the story was all of the human leaders decided they were going to agree to this, or whoever was left, something, but there's not there. So they just came and took.
Yeah. What do y'all think about the cancer? The cancer swap, right?
Hold
The
on, hold
way
on.
that we know
Wait a minute.
from the person who not gonna con who what's his name? Aiken talks to on the ship, they will be able to use the cancer in order to progress their own species.
Yeah, but it's
Thank
I
you.
still it's still one sided. I get that could be a benefit, but that was not presented. It wasn't like they woke everybody up and said, "Hey, all you guys who got cancer, we want to get rid of your cancer, but in order to get rid of the cancer, you have to have sex with this thing." Like it was not presented in a way that says that they did it for the benefit of themselves,
Okay.
not for the benefit of the people.
I can't
I wish
argue
it
there.
was, but that didn't happen.
Okay.
I
Yes, you were saying?
I would even argue that the Owen Collie plotted on us and waited until Earth and humanity was weak and vulnerable enough so they could swoop in and do what they do. Because if you think back to Dawn, they said we orbit Earth. We have a ship that's orbiting Earth. So in my mind, they've been watching us. They've been studying us. They just waited until our dumb butts destroyed the planet, weakened our forces enough with the nuclear war, and then they swooped in and took us. I believe that, because their nature is to colonize. Their nature is to say, these are the best parts of you. I want them. These are the parts of you that I deem unvaluable. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kill your planet. How is
Mm-hmm.
that not colonization?
No, it is 100%. I'm not arguing against what y'all said. I do think they're colonizers. I'm just very interested in the ways in which, or why Butler refers to them as gene traders, right?
I
Melanie.
feel like I'm sorry, I feel like, the saying that the between the hunter and the lion, the hunter gets to tell the story. And so I feel like the way it's written, it's more so from the Owen Kali perspective.
Mhm.
So they're the victors. They have won. To the victor goes the spoils. They've won. So they will use words like gene traders, or we're trading, and or we're doing this to for you, because they can write the story. They're in the position of power. They're the ones able to write the story. So they're going to use words like gene trading, and we're supporting each other, and we have a symbiotic relationship. So I feel like that's why they're using those kinds of
That makes
words
sense.
and terms.
I agree. Melanie, you got something you want to jump in here?
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the dark forest theory posits that in the universe there is the hunter and there's the hunter hunted, like she says. And so when it comes to civilizations like other life forces, you don't want to call upon yourself attention because you don't know what more advanced civilization is watching you and will come prey. And I think about that because we have for decades had that. Sorry, I'm like in a car. We've had that radio signal that we send out and say, "Hey, y'all, we are like here." We send our music. We send everything that or signifies that we're intelligent. So obviously, they don't need to actually take our genes to understand us. They just can use our culture and our language and our what we have shared about ourselves. So essentially, we have called the hunter to hunt us. Now, I think they took the colonization, they were intelligent colonizers. White people are not intelligent by far. So, where they went in plundering, destroying, these came and they said, well, we understand they have a hierarchical view, are inherent in their DNA. So, if we just wait it out, or if they didn't have to wait it out, we know that eventually they're going to fall upon their own sword. So that's what happened. And when we talk about trading, like they've been saying, it's not an equal trade, and it doesn't need to be an equal trade because if you think of that forest theory, we're not meant to be here long compared to other civilizations that have like surpassed the desire to kill one another or to not keep each other alive. Civilization requires, or a note of civilization requires that you value life. Humanity does not value life. So obviously, if the hunters were to come looking, they're like, well, they don't need to exist. We know they're going to end. So we'll just take the best of what they have and bolster ourselves.
Yeah, and to this point, I want to thank you for sharing that, Melanie. I want to read what Butler is talking about in her notes. I have it right under this Owen Colley section titled "Aliens." And so someone put in the mission put typed missionaries in the chat, which triggered this memory that this is in my notes. And this is what she says. She calls them alien missionaries in one of the versions of her writings on this series. And she says alien missionaries land on Earth in the present or near future. They seek to convert us to their religion, and that is in quotes, which involves undergoing serious changes physically and psychologically. The aliens are serious believers in their way. They are not evil, irrational, thieving, or otherwise villainous. They are not comic or stupid or narrow minded. They offer. That's a period. They do not coerce. That's a period. Converts can change their minds up into the alterations. They are selective. The changes are permanent and irreversible. They want only to make a few thousand good converts here, then sleep again and go on their way. They may be the forerunners of others, as missionaries were forerunners of murderous, enslaving, raping, torturing, thieving conquerors. So, in Butler's note, she does not see the Owen Collie, the aliens, as evil, not yet, at least. She sees them as the forerunners to what could come. And by forerunners, I mean, I'm going to read that last sentence again. They may be the forerunners of others, as missionaries were forerunners of the murderous, enslaving, raping, torturing, and thieving conquerors.
Yeah, but that ain't how they came though. Again, they didn't. There was no. I guess for me, you guys can tell my hang up is choice. There was no choice at all. Period. It was like we're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna lie to you, or I'm not gonna tell you big pieces of what it is I have ultimately planned for this planet.
Yeah.
Uh, the one thing that I did want to bring up was I thought about Tuskegee experiment with a king.
Mm.
So when he's this baby, and like there's no way you're gonna tell me they could not have found that kid in a heartbeat. Like there's just no way. Like he would not do this. So they sacrificed him,
Mhm.
sacrificed the what they knew would happen with him being separated from his sister
Mhm.
or his sibling,
Mhm.
and watched and waited. And then when it didn't go the way that they thought it may go, then it was okay for others to look for it. And I got a little confused, so I'm not sure. Maybe somebody can clear this up. Impression that Lilith and her family said, "Screw what y'all talking about. I'm gonna go find my child. I'm gonna go get him back." Uh, that was the impression I got, that they came, the Olin Kali and Lilith came, and they waited for him to come to them. The Olin Kali from the ship and others were in disagreement about whether or not he should be brought back.
Mhm.
And she
Yeah.
just said, or that group from Lowell said they're gonna come and do something else.
Yeah, the family decided, like Akeen's immediate family decided, hey, we're gonna let this roll out and we're gonna see how it works. We're gonna see how this experiment works. But the people on the ship, once he gave, I forget the name of the person on the ship, but once he gave that person the impression of what he felt for his sibling, the person, or I don't remember if it was he or she, confirmed that we were not in agreement with that, right? But you mentioned the word experiment, and I think that's very fascinating to say that he was an experiment, because we've seen an experimental model as well in Mary, right? I ain't trying to bring up Doro, but I am just saying that we have seen experimental models and experimental exchanges go wrong in the same way that we saw it in Mind of My Mind. Now, it did work out for Mary, right? She does defeat them. I mean, she gets rid of their progenitor, all of these things, but we have seen the effects of experimentation or experimenting on people, and to the point of consent. That's the same thing Sam was saying last week. She was just like, no, they took away their choice. They did not give them an opportunity. If I'm not mistaken, that was last week. But yeah, no, I agree. There was not real consent, and when they decided that they were going to continue resisting, we do know that there's another group of resistors who were found underground, right? And these are the people who are believed to be the military um, backbone white men underground, who we did not see, but we do know that they were mentioned in the text. So I'm with you, Tina, and everyone else who feels that way. But yeah, Akeen was potentially the experiment, and they had to experiment. And here's why I say that. This is not to, excuse what they did, but Lilith was an experiment. We think back to Dawn, the series of awakenings. Remember, Nakan says someone underestimated you. So they had these years of experimenting with these humans over and over again, because they don't really know. They only know up until the point of their experiments. They had never had a child construct taken into a human village, which is why we see a king going sleeping with the human women, right? Because he still looks human, and they're like, you should not want to do that. So they were realizing the shortcomings of their knowledge, but also they needed the information, and that's why they said that it'll never happen again that way. They could have found him on day one. You know what I'm saying? But they needed the information to further their breeding project.
Yeah, that's why I said this. To me, it's like just the Tuskegee experiment, and the fact that when the cure was found, they just kept going to see what happens. Like there was a cure, it was found, and they kept the experiment going. So I feel very strongly that that was something that was just crazy. And also I want like this need to have children and to have more children. It just seemed out of whack to me. Like you guys are willing to kidnap children that are not human, and then cut on them so that they can be more human, but you despise the fact that they're not human. It just seemed like, so are you? Part of me was like, when the Owen Collie were experimenting on them or cleaning them up or doing whatever else, did they do something with their brain or their thinking or whatever else that leaned heavy into being just terrorists or barbarians or whatever, because it just seemed like there was no reasoning to me. Like I would think that they would have better reasoning than where they are, and that bothers me a lot.
That they wanted children.
But it wasn't like it. Not that they wanted children, but that they were willing to kidnap
Oh.
somebody, kidnap these constructs, and then some at one part of King, the women were having sex with him,
Mhm.
freely to be able to maybe he can produce a kid. Then we're gonna kidnap these kids, and then we're gonna like cut off the ugly worm parts. Like you gonna cut a kid?
Well,
Just
I think it's the sacred image of the human body, right? That goes back to Survivor, right? Not only did the missionaries believe that God sent them to space to, colonize and spread the message, but to progress the human image. Also, think about the clay art and the what are the patternists. The tension was the body, right? And so, of course, if the human body is threatened, this is why we don't like the other in the contact zone. If the human body is challenged, the sacredness of the human body is challenged, you will see people go through great lengths. So whether children are not on with you, Tina, I totally get it, but it does not matter. They want a human looking thing to make them feel good, to make them feel better. And because they cannot produce children of their own, right, that will give them that human image, they will alter a humanoid body.
And also, I wonder how much of that is to also the humans trying to retain some level of control
Hmm.
over something and in their environment. And children are quote unquote controllable, and it's sad how we treat children, in our society. And I'm wondering how much of that is that they were trying to bring some of that over into their resistor villages, where these are, whether humans or constructs that we have some kind of size control over, something that we can control. Hence, even just developing the weapons also. This is something that we can use as a tool of control to empower over others. So I
Yeah.
think that might also be a part of it, not just wanting something to say that looks like them, but also something that they can have dominion or dominance over.
I did not think about that, and I think that is spot on because when you think about the hierarchical nature, remember the contradiction is hierarchy and intelligence cannot coexist. And because humans are naturally hierarchical, they're going to go that route. So, of course, if you want something to lord over, if the Oankali are lording over you and the men cannot be men, right, in the way that they're used to expressing masculinity, of course, then everyone wants something to lord over. You'd have nothing. I have nothing. You wouldn't use it. I have nothing. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yes, that hierarchical nature to want to control, but to reproduce for control. I think that's worth us thinking about. Yes.
But I just
I
real quick.
just,
Oh,
I
just
just,
real quick.
oh,
Because I mentioned this last week on how like the very first before we had weapons, our very first thing that we did against humanity is like do detrimental harm to our children. I said last week the most marginalized, oppressed group are our children, and continuing that thread is saying that for the Oankali, for the humans, they need that feeling up like the children of men. We talked about that movie last week. They need that feeling of what keeps us human. But again, back to your like diametrically opposed understanding of humanity. Though we need children to keep our humanity, we also do a complete disservice to them because we are predisposed to not value them, inherently not valuing ourselves. They are the continuation of us. And so even though they're a continuation of us, we see how time and again we collective do not keep them safe. And the Owen Collie recognize that. And that's also why, particularly for men, and not just the men, but women too, but for the men, if think of a man, if he does not have anything, if he is broke, if he is without a job, think of the most like dangerous man in your life at any point. It was a man who felt like the world had done him a disservice. Now, multiply that by a man who has survived an apocalypse. Multiply that by a man who's no longer home. Multiply that by a man who is like existing in a world that is not for him and that he is no longer like commandeering. You're going to see terrible, terrible things. And again, if we harm our children just because we want them as accessories and nothing more, imagine what would happen to children in this new world.
You know, Melanie, I'm reminded when you say that, think of a man and can, consider his, his socioeconomic positioning. I'm reminded of that comment you mentioned about Bankole, and his cart, right? He had this cart.
What I say about that cart? What I say about that cart? You need that cart. I did.
He had this cart. He had this thing. He had something to possess or to call his own. What now we have the resistors that don't have the resistor men, right? These are, yes, the women wanted to cut off the tentacles, but we see majority of the violence coming from the men or at the direction of men, as when the man told the woman to pour the gasoline in Aiken's room.
So what just clicked to me is that this is like the story of humanity when we're not at the top of the food chain.
Mm.
The Owen Collie are technically more advanced than us,
Mm-hmm.
and we are not used to that.
Mm-hmm.
We're not you because I was just thinking like the Owen Collie are kind of treating us like animals. Like they're just gathering us, they're breeding us, they're taking the best parts of us for themselves and discarding the rest. But that's like what we do to animals. That's what we do to cows and chickens and everything else that we eat and use. So yeah, I just wanted to say that. Like I feel like this is like a story or a critique of humanity when we're not the dominating species.
Yeah, and our fight to become that again, right? What lengths? I think the question is, what lengths are we willing to go to? One, to maintain our humanity, but two, to be back on top, to rule and to reign. What lengths are we willing to go to? Because we see that once we get towards the end of the narrative and the resistors are tired of resisting, they see the hope of Mars. Tate is like, look, go get somebody. I'm about to be up out of here on my way to glory. I actually do need the assistance. I need the alteration. I need the things. How long can we hold out before we realize that we've just been holding on to a fleeting hope?
That's how I was feeling that's how I was feeling like towards the end of the book when Aiken went back to Phoenix and was like, hey, this is my plan. And some of the humans were still like, no. And I was just like, dude, at this point you guys aren't even safe anymore because your lives are so unfulfilling. You guys are just killing each other. So why not? Why not? But at the same time, I understand their resistance because, in my opinion, the Owen Collie did it a little bit in a nefarious way.
Okay.
I don't know. It's just hard. Like with Dawn, like it's just an uncomfortable
Mm.
thing, and I don't really know what I would do.
You're not meant to be comfortable. Reality is uncomfortable, right? And I think that is in any book. Butler wants to push you to the edge to make a decision here, right? So no one, you're not going to be comfortable in this next book. You're going to be really uncomfortable with fledgling, um, in a lot of ways. So I don't think any of Butler's books are are.
Speaking of
Hmm?
Speaking of uncomfortability, real quick, did anybody feel like Octavia Butler was playing with gender or sexuality with the whole Akeem don't want to mate with his sibling because they were apart, but the sibling want to be a man, but like that whole complicated chunk of thing? Because at first I thought it was going At first I thought like she was hinting on that maybe Akeem and his sibling were potentially going to be gay or bisexual. But yeah, I was just wondering if anybody thought anything about that.
Uh,
Oh, go ahead, Valerie.
okay, I'm sorry. I'm glad you guys brought all this up because I was thinking about how the it's wild that the humans they act so indifferent and they hate the Anakli, but then racism still exists because Keen, when he went to visit the only English-speaking resistor village, like treated them really poorly because of the color of his skin, and it's like, how can you still be racist against melanated human beings when there's clearly the existence of other aliens who look completely different? And then the thing about, I'm glad you guys are talking about the children thing because reading throughout it, it's like throughout the entire books, everybody's just talking about how, oh, we can't have children anymore. And it's like, it's almost as if like they're acting like the only purpose in life is to breed and have children, which is a very odd, weird, primitive, like bioessentialism viewing of life. Like they're complaining about how the Anakli are making them live primitively again, but then they're obsessed with breeding and having children. But then they want to cut off the tentacles of Anakli human um, hybrids. Oh, it's so wild. These are like fictional beings. I felt like calling them hybrids would be insensitive and weird. But
You know,
um,
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Valerie. I'm sorry.
no, I don't know. I was just gonna also say that aside from that, I loved the interesting and cool fact is that a Khan's sibling, they in the Nankli society, they're just all like, oh yeah, no, you can change genders if you want to and choose whether you want to be. Like their sibling is like, I don't want to be a female, and is very uncomfortable with all that. And all the other elder Anaklis are like, oh yeah, well you can choose. Like if you want to stay here and spend time with your another male O'Connelly, it's like that fluidity is that like they can choose and they can be who whichever gender they want to be is also really neat and cool.
Yeah, as you were speaking, Valerie, it made me think of the conversations that happen surrounding trad wives or stay at home moms versus working women. And more specifically, the conversations or the claim that women are more fulfilled with children and taking care of the home. I'm not saying this is my view. I'm just saying this is some of the rhetoric or the discourse surrounding these different types of women. And I think Butler is starting to question that or is questioning that in adulthood rights because it is when the women cannot fully work, they do desire this mothering, to lean into the motherhood aspects of femininity or the nurturing side. And I'm wondering, is it just because they can't do anything else? Right?
I think it's because I think it's because all of these villages are set up in patriarchal process. They all are doing it. They're going back to what it was. They're not saying, "Hey, we need to have a new kind of society, a new sense of community. We all need to do this." They went back to the exact same roles and the exact same situations. So yes, each one of them based off of that are going to be unfulfilled, the men and the women, because they don't have the ability to do not just procreate, but they don't have the ability to do everything they did before,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't have they can't reach it. So you always are going to feel less than or desire because you were trying to create a patriarchal society or village. And if you try something different, if you tried more of a communal situation or another kind of structure or another type of being, you might have had a different outcome. But that's not what they were trying to create. And that's one of the problems. Like like the whole thing with, we decided as a group to not to have guns, and then all of a sudden we need to have guns now.
You like on
Or
your
we decide
guns.
right, or it's just one of those things, or the way that the leaders of the town are all these men, and the people who are going out wandering from one place to the next are men. They, because everything has been set up again, like it's patriarchal. So if that wasn't it, if they had said something completely opposite of, if they came up with a whole different kind of a system, or they, their thinking of what was important was, you know, being somebody who could understand medicine, or somebody who could do really good with farming, or something, like if they had a different kind of thing, maybe it would have been different. But they went back to the things they gave them, to me, that hindered them. They went back to that. They didn't evolve, and that's one of the problems with the humans for me, is that as much as the Ollantaytambi has played around with their genes and did all of this stuff, they're essentially the exact same, and there's no progression. So it's hard to believe that there's no, like, intellectually or whatever else, there should be something or some movement. Hell, they need Lauren to talk about this change or something. They need a new way of thinking, and that does not happen.
Yes,
I just
I wanted to piggyback on what you were saying,
Go ahead, Shanadi.
like on what you were saying, Tina, because it's like they had no space for imagination. This is what we knew from pre-war, and we're going to fall right back into the same patriarchal patterns. Where are the dreamers in this group? Where are the imaginers? Where are the people who can, you know, broaden their horizons to think of something new and different, and something it's obvious that their patriarchal society and their hierarchical society did not work, which is why they're in the predicament they're in. But instead of dreaming and imagining, they went right back to, even further back into their pre-war ways of being.
I also want to say really quickly, there was this TikTok that I saw years ago, probably like in the first year of the pandemic era. And the lady was like, just think about whose imagination you're living in when you look around. And and the way she describes is like, you are living in the imagination of slaveholders. You are living in the imagination of a cis white man from the 1800s, or technically the 1600s when it first started. And when you think of it that way, like the world that we are in is not for us because it wasn't imagined by us. I then think about the people who they brought back. And I know race isn't really like mentioned too much in the book, but I think that is important to call out. Also, I do wonder if she had tried to write this book in 2020, what would the difference be? Because you'd have more women who are okay with not having children, I bet. You would have more people who are able to imagine a different world, who would be those dreamers. Because if this was in the height of the 80s, when we're talking about the Jordan Belforts, the money was rolling in America. And so, yes, capitalism was like entrenched, right? So we were past the golden age of the 60s, but now we're, or at least for like the white people, like we're in the prime money bag season. Reagan was coming in or already there. We were in the money bag season. So, of course, they want to go back to that. But now, if we were to say this book was written now, would they want to go back, or would they imagine better? Because they're a bit further removed from the sheen of what the prosperous America is supposed to be. And then I also think about how, like, particularly with the ability to live longer, nobody wanted to think. We talk about anti-intellectualism and the lack of critical thinking and the illiteracy rates in adults. But even then, when people were reading more adults could read. Nobody was still wanting to turn it on. Nobody wanted to build a better world from what they had, knowing that they were essentially on an alien planet, because it's no longer Earth that we know. It's an alien planet. We got to go to space without having to go to space, and you still want to do the shit that we was doing yesterday. So I do wonder about that.
Yeah, so Shanandi, when you were speaking, it reminded me, and it's in one of Butler's books. I don't remember where she used this quote, but it's by Sidney Sheldon, and it says, "A blank paper, a blank piece of paper is God's way of telling us how hard it is to be God." And it is you talking about imagination and the lack thereof that reminded me of this quote in one of her other books. I don't remember where it is, but the reason why I bring this up is because I think a lot, and I come out of the educational system, but I think a lot about primary education and how imagination is literally beat out of the children, metaphorically speaking, right? You color inside the lines, you don't color outside of those lines. You have to stay within these boundaries. You have to do this to be acceptable, all of these things. So it's no wonder when I'm thinking about today that a lot of people are uncomfortable being creative and imaginative, because the educational system has literally trained you to be a worker and trained you to replicate the system that is most profitable to the economy. And so today I'm thinking about, and this is when that Melanie mentioned, if it would have been written today in 2020, and I'm thinking about the current MAGA movement, even the previous MAGA movement. But now we're in MAGA part 2, and even that line, the running line, the "Make America Great Again," is not imaginative. We're going back to or trying to go back to, or trying to replicate those systems of domination that we had under the Reagan economic system, right? And so what we see now is not an innovative movement. It is a regressive movement in a lot of ways. And it is showing us the lack of creativity, because creativity takes a lot of responsibility. Just like being well is not a trifling matter, as Tony K. Bambara would say, it's a lot of responsibility. So to be creative, you have to be responsible. But if you are just reactionary and you are just replicating former systems of domination, you don't have to take a responsibility or be creative. And so I think about your comment and Melanie's comment in relation to where we are today, and we see this same thing happening, right? As Melanie said in the chat, it takes a lot of brain effort. Yeah. It takes a lot of mental power to think through something, as opposed to, oh, what's the equation? Here's this answer on the calculator. You know what I'm saying? Tina, you got something to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like when they were talking about the different villages and they were talking about Phoenix, and I thought that was an interesting name for that for their town. And they were talking about it, and they were like, "We going up to this site where we can salvage and get all of this stuff." And I'm thinking, oh well, they could, before I got to the part where I realized that was not going to happen. I was like, okay, so maybe they are trying to develop sewer systems, or maybe they were trying, you know what I mean, like windmills or other kind of like just a lot of stuff. But when you read through it, it seems like they did very little of that. They found stuff that they could polish up and basically trade with other people, but not like, okay, here is a system in which we can elevate our life, not a livelihood, but elevate our lives from day to day. We can share it, we could do something else. It seemed like it was more important for them to have better stuff to trade as opposed to invent, create,
Well,
anything like that.
the bartering system is very profitable.
Yeah, I guess. Exactly. Somebody in the chat said that there was something with the plastic, how dangerous it was. And they, like, this is really dangerous, like this is poison for a king when he put his mouth on it or whatever. And they were like, yeah, just don't touch it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or something. But it just seemed like there was a complete waste of opportunity to do. That's why for some, like, I got a sneaky, and this might be my own Delulu thing, but I'm like, I really think that they've had to cut out, or just like, it can't be that many people that survived and nobody thinks like that. Like, nobody thinks like that.
Or maybe they're just not in the dominant class. Generally, the people who lead with force are the ones who, are at the forefront.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And when they go back to the ship, and there's all this, like, we have to come to the Oankali, like, we all need to, like, everybody gets to weigh in, and that we don't listen to the children. So Akeem is not seen as somebody that has enough knowledge to weigh in. I'm like, y'all put him in an experiment and had him. He's the only Oankali that has lived with the resistors. He's the only one that knows them intimately, or knows them well enough, because you had that kid with them for a long time. And now he comes back and he tells you, and you're like, yeah, but you're not really of age yet.
Yeah, that's how, like, what is that? The wipe your butt syndrome, I think they
Right,
refer to as, right? Like, if you wipe your butt, they can't take no advice from. If they wipe your butt, they can't take any advice from you or anything like that. But I
right.
also think, yes, to everything you said. But I also think that not only is Akeem is the only one who looks like him, right? He's. I think it was mentioned that there's a version of him in other colonies, in other trade colonies, whose sensory artery or hand is in the tongue and not on the body and before metamorphosis. But he had to be that. I know we were giving him a hard time for leaving him there as an experiment, but how I think Butler was really looking for a way to bridge the divide between the humans and the Owen Collie. Like they're talking to each other on different sides of the fence, and no one is really listening. So you need a hybrid body, a body that is both and, in order to migrate between the two and kind of find some type of middle ground, which Akeem does, and which why Butler mentions that he is the Martin Luther King Jr. of the text.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I do. I agree that I think that that's specifically what he was there. I hate the fact that he was an experiment,
Mm-hmm.
but also you then decide not to listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
You had to have another adult, somebody else who believed in what he was saying in order to make the case,
Mm-hmm.
because you refused to listen to him, even though you put him there to do exactly what he's doing. To come back with this valuable information, this valuable data about like how they're different and what do they think about it and why they should be there, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that there was also the kind of like dismissal, because he didn't put it into, well, this is what the human wants. He's saying, here is how we've set up our society.
Mm-hmm.
We got three distinctive groups,
Mm-hmm.
and the humans do not have the third group.
Mm-hmm.
You have determined they shouldn't have the third group. Why?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How is that right? If you're saying we're fair in trade,
Mm-hmm.
we say that there is purpose for this third group. Why would the humans have the third group? And then when they decided, yeah, we're gonna let you guys go to Mars, well, we ain't doing nothing. I was like, what the?
What the
We're not
hell?
gonna give y'all jack. You got what you got. That's it. If you want to go, you go. But we basically not doing nothing for you.
Okay. I mean, look, your critiques are fair. They're fair, but I think that the saving grace, we do see a saving grace because we have a child involved in mixture, right? And we haven't really seen that we didn't see that in the patternist books. No, we didn't see that in the patternist books, right? And so there would have never been a middle ground had we not had a hybrid body. And when I'm thinking about hybrid bodies, y'all know I mentioned this in the last class, and I'm always thinking about children, the mulatto figures, the biracial children in today's society or in historic America, right? And how those bodies were demonized and how those bodies were kind of ostracized in a lot of ways, right? And of course, when we're thinking about tragic mulatto, that figure in literature, the only reason that this figure is tragic is because it doesn't fit on either side comfortably. They're generally too dark to be welcome into the white community, and they're either too white to be welcomed into the black community. So they're always in this limbo phase, negotiating their identities, belonging both places and no place at all. And so that is in a way what Akin is navigating in the text. Yeah, I said Akin was white passing. I think he was human passing for sure. Right. And you would think he was human before metamorphosis. He was human passing for sure.
I said white as a joke, but that's basically what I meant. He could pass as a human, so he could go live in the human community and be safer. And they're more open to listening to what he has to say because he doesn't look scary to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Akin's metamorphosis and the suddenness of it, that was a plot twist for me that I did not see coming, and it just it really disturbed me that I just I sat here wondering, just so what, how much of him remains human? I mean, his external appearance is no longer human. He has Oankali abilities. So how, like, what part of him is still human besides his, well, I don't know what part of him is still human besides his mother was is human, but he doesn't look human anymore, and he doesn't act human anymore. So
Yeah.
where's his humanity? That was a plot twist I didn't see coming, for him to look totally on Kali after metamorphosis.
Yeah, I think the explanation that the person gave when he was on the ship, that at his cellular level he is still human, and at his cellular level he is Owen Collie. And so I think that he would have to depend on the cellular makeup within him, because I do understand what you're saying. Like, is he more Owen Collie now than human? But I think the only thing that changed was not his essence. And I use essence in reference to Anyanwu too. Though she is shape shifting into other bodies, and y'all know we went back and forth last week. We ain't doing it this week. But though she is shape shifting into other bodies, in essence, she is still a black woman. So though Akeem has transformed into more of an Owen Collie looking being, which he did not want to do. He wanted to remain a human presenting figure, and he went through transition, if we want to call it that. He is still, in essence, biologically a hybrid, right? Though his outward appearance has changed.
One of the biggest differences for me between humans and the Owen Collie is that I feel like the Owen Collie didn't have any emotions. So I feel like maybe that part of Akeem will remain past his metamorphosis. Um yeah, I just felt like that was one of, I mean, besides like their appearance and their general nature, they just don't they're
They
emotionless.
stand on
So
principle.
yes, and I think, and that was the side that Akeem was challenged with, because when he spent all of those years in the human co- colony, he, on one hand, he was saying these people are sick, why don't they just get a ulai? But then on the other hand, the more time he spent with them, he was able to understand, like, oh, this is why they're upset, this is why they don't want to do that. So
Well, emotion is relegated to the realm of human, right?
yeah.
Okay, so of course, then that tracks in what you're saying, right? They, the Owen Collie don't have to be emotional, because they're like, it don't matter what we feel. The goal is the goal, and you have to stick to the goal. But the human emotion does take precedence in a lot of human decisions. And there is a lot of emotionalism. But when you're black and white and you're committed to the goal, your emotions don't matter. So yes, the Owen Collie are emotionless because they want the goal so bad, or they don't present emotion. I won't even say they're emotionless. They just don't express emotion in the ways in which humans express emotion.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. They definitely express emotions. They just don't do it in the verbal human way. Like, they express their emotions through visuals and through actually sharing the emotion through stimuli, through with the tentacles. And it's kind of like how autistic folks are. Like, they have emotions, but they don't autistic people don't express them in the way that neurotypical people do. And to, if it's okay to piggy off what Tina was talking about, in a way, humanity, we do have a third, not in the way that the Uloi, like how the Uloi are, but like, I've been thinking about this all last month about how, because I've looked into LGBT, like paganism and in ancient cultures and stuff. Like, there, we as gender diverse people and sexual diverse people, we were the shamans, the spiritual leaders of tribes. I mean, if you look at the, somebody told me that the term Hydra is kind of like a slur, but I thought I've heard in India, but so I don't mean to use it, but
What
it's
term?
a HIJRAS. It's an actual legally recognized third gender in India. Oh, and also India now recognizes trans women as actual women. I just remembered learning about that recently. But anyways, and then also with like the Two Spirit tribes and Native Americans, and when you look back in the ancient cultures, like male eunuchs, they were uh, uh, like at the temples, and they were like of different goddesses and stuff, and there was very like there was also like sacred prostitution at different goddesses temples and stuff. Like queerness has always existed, and within both like gender and sexuality, it's not a new thing. We've always existed, and the fact that we've now gone from like it just blows my mind. We were the spiritual leaders. We were the gateway to the mystical realm, and now we are just shunned and just treated like the parasites of society. And it's not exactly the same as how the Uloi are, but in a way, humanity has always had that third, kind of like non-binary-ish and like non-male or female aspect.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I just say really quickly the reason that is that it no longer exists? You know what I'm about to say. You know who did it. Um, you can shake your head, Doc. It's fine. You know why it's no longer a thing across the colonized world. And why, again, if we go back to who is still here in this future state and what they likely look like, why they are so disgusted by the Uloi. I mean, yeah, Lilith had she struggled with it, but eventually she was able to reconcile her stuff with Nikanj. And there were some across who could and couldn't, but I would posit again, remember who caused the two spirits and the shamans of the world to cease to exist and to find a new religion. And those same descendants are the ones building the plate houses with blue and white paint on it and rebuilding guns. We're bringing back epigenetics, babes. We're bringing back epigenetics. So if we think about it from an epigenetic standpoint, it's an on and off switch. One could say, are we epigenetically predisposed to some of us not liking an other because of our environment or because of what had been experienced by those who came before us? Just saying. Just saying.
One of I agree with you, Melanie. So what you and Valerie were talking about 100% in this, because it was blowing my mind, the whole reaction to that, especially when the king came back to the ship and he met his Olin Kali, who's going to become his his Oluya. I
Uloi.
can't never. Yeah, that one, that one. And it was like he said when the scent hit him, when he came into the room and where they were, and he felt whatever scent, pheromones or whatever that he had no control over hit the ground. He was like losing his mind. It was like a roofie on steroids. And I mean, because he was like he couldn't wait to get attach himself to them, and all of a sudden he could tolerate his sibling, where before he couldn't tolerate being around his sibling. But that pheromone or whatever it was, so when somebody in the chat said that it's genetic, it's genetic. It's not emotional. Whatever it is that they're feeling or their emotions, it's all a genetic kind of pool. And to me, again, we talked about the fact that when they first came in, they like used that, they gassed them beforehand, and then they came in, and then it was like they were out of control from the euphoria that they got with the sex, with that act. So it just seems like not only did they within this text displace those individuals who may have been same-sex couples or whatever else, because they had to be some survivors who were predisposed to that or who were that, and they got rid of that, but then they uh it was just weird. Like there wasn't. It was like they dominated the male and the female, and they were in the center. I don't know. I'm using my words here, kind of crazy, but this was kind of. It was just
So
interesting to me.
what you're saying goes back to the point that Canavan was had made in the beginning opening statement. I'm just going to read the two lines that speak to what you're trying to articulate here. He says, the Onkali's chosen candidates for awakening are all healthy, under 50, English speaking. As my students are more and more prone to noticing, they are all apparently straight and cisgendered, or perhaps more sinisterly, some have been subtly altered by the Oankali, so they are straight and cisgendered now. The Oankali's vision of the future may be less sexist and less racist than our present, but it is more homophobic and transphobic, with a sort of compulsory heteronormativity that sees both the backward-looking reactionary male humans and their Oankali captors agreeing that all humans are to pair off in monogamous heterosexual couples in order to have children.
So that's why I was trying to ask the chat, like, what did you guys think about Akeem and his sibling and their struggle with their genders? Because like every time Akeem or I forget what the sibling's name was,
T.
T, whatever. Every time it like the topic of gender came up, like they got uncomfortable. And I was like, is it so bad if Akeem metamorphoses and he become a man and T metamorphoses and they become a man and then they just have like a man couple with an ulai? Like is that bad? But it was so bothersome and so unnatural to them that the Owen Collies world that they are building is extremely homophobic. And I thought that Butler was kind of maybe trying to explore that with this whole gender, with them struggling with their gender expression.
I actually like hearing you reread that passage. I can actually see it now because like it's true. Even though it's like that fluidity, it is cool. But then hearing the two of you talk about that, it makes me think about how like with T, they were uncomfortable with having to choose, and they were like, well, you can be either or, but like there was no option of like you just can be and exist. Like that they had to choose and assimilate into either gender of male or female, unless you're like Uloi. But and yeah, that's this heteronormativity that is, oh gosh, my words. Yeah.
Even throughout the book, like when they were trying to talk about it, all of the other adults in the story were saying like, well, you're clearly a man, so T is definitely going to be a woman. Like they didn't even question it. They were like, this is going to happen. You're a boy. T is definitely going to be a girl because you're a boy. That's it. And then when there was a possibility that might not be the case, that presented not an issue, but like they different. We kind of side eyeing them.
Right, and then
Also, with all of the ways that the Oankali can do different things with genes and with genetics, it seems to me that they could have, if they were interested in not being so heteronormative in their setup, come up with some other ways for for reproduction. It seemed like I'm just thinking through both books. Every time there was a sexual experience or a mating experience. It was either to introduce the mating ritual to the humans, or to procreate. That's, it's so, it's like, so except for Akin, having, going out with the resistor females, and having sex with them, it seemed like it was more so focused on male ooloi and female procreation. And I mean, they could come up with something different, and be more, more with not sticking so much to the gender. Well, it's not really binary, but because there was the ooloi, but with that gender structure of, and where the female human, or the female Oankali, were the only ones who could reproduce, who could bring children forth.
I want
Yes.
to answer. I want to switch a little bit. Well, not switch, but I want to answer Diana's question in the chat, and she's questioning or asking: is it Butler's feelings about her own gender and appearance? And I can say we could probably go that way, and here's why I'm telling you this. Um, I think I dropped my Survivors article in the Substack that was published in Melis in 2022 or 2023, one and two. But in the earlier version of that article that did not make it into print, the scholars suggested that I take certain parts of Butler's life out of it. And I want to read a part that did not make it into the article. It is in reference to Elena from Survivor. We've read that book, but I do think it holds here. And so we're about to end class. So I want to say, I'm going to read this really quickly, and we can have a brief discussion about Butler and her own feelings about her identity, her size, the ways in which she presented. So just listen up real quick. It says, though Butler provides reasons as to why she rescinds Survivor, scholars have overlooked another possibility. In addition to feeling that it was an embarrassing early work, Butler reveals that Survivor was her first attempt at creating an aesthetically large character resembling herself. She explains, here I have a character who is not necessarily fat, but she's very androgynous looking and tall. I used to be mistaken for a man a lot, and occasionally someone would try to chase me out of the ladies' room, which used to upset the hell out of me. Through the protagonist, Elena, Butler experiments with navigating deep-seated physical and emotional insecurities and her own power as a Black woman, an interpretation that other scholars have disregarded. In her notes, she obsessively writes and rewrites the purpose of Elena's story, uncovering her own struggle to affirm the necessity of her existence, writing within a genre that has not historically accepted Black people. That's the part of the article that did not make it to print because, scholars police other people. But Diana raised a very important question, right? And I wanted to really hone in on the fact that Butler writes that she used to be chased out of the ladies' room a lot because she would be mistaken as male, right? She was a 6 feet tall, heavier set woman, androgynous looking, a very deep voice. Y'all have heard her voice. If you have not, just YouTube Octavia Butler interview, and you will hear her speak. And yeah, people that did kind of impact her sexuality and her sexual life, and she did experiment with being with the woman, as her Huntington Library notes reveal. But she then discovered, no, that's not it. I'm just longing for love. And of course, if you are a tall, dark-skinned Black woman, androgynous looking Black woman during the times in which she was growing up, of course you're going to have those thoughts and those complications with your identity, right? And so I do think that we could kind of see this as Butler trying to navigate such a touchy space that she's had to navigate in the world herself. Was that too heavy? Did we end on a heavy note?
No,
Yeah,
I
I was
think
thinking
that
about that too, where a
No,
lot
I
of,
think it's good.
even today, a lot of people don't realize, that transphobia really negatively also, we're, as Black women, a lot of us, we are a lot of times being, one of the ways that transphobia is launched at us is as cis black women is, oh, you look like a man or you're mannish. And I've even had to correct members of my own family when they've talked about, visible black women who may look like Butler, and, saying, oh, she looks like a man. And, you have to kind of, stop that in its tracks, because it's transphobic, and it not only affects black trans women, it affects black cis women as well, to have those views and then express them in public, and then exercise things like chasing women out of bathrooms because you decide that they are not quote unquote feminine enough.
When one of the times that I met her and she saw this adulthood, I had a copy of that at the time, and she signed it. One of the questions, because I remember this, was somebody was asking why did the men that picked were smaller men than Lilith, because the first guy was Asian and he was smaller, and Tino was Latina and also smaller. And so they, somebody made that observation, and she was saying, it was like her way of kind of like just oppose just comparing like what a woman should be versus what a man should be, or what people think about it. So now you got this tall woman who has, people thought that she was a male. Then we're talking about Lilith, and then she chose, like, she instantly was attracted to the first guy, the Asian guy, and then she was attracted to Tino. She was instantly attracted to them, and she was just saying like she liked the visual or the idea that this wasn't the norm or what people thought about. Whereas with Gabe and Tate, they were the norm.
I think that, well, I like Butler's female protagonists better when they're tall, when they're
Me too.
big. Like,
Me
I
too.
think that, and I don't know if they're all like self inserts, but I think that all of her big female characters are the ones that I like. Anyamu, psh, but the bigger ones like Lauren and Lilith and Amber, even from the Patternist book, they were all big women and they were powerful. And I feel like that was Octavia Butler kind of self-inserting herself and maybe hoping that she could feel that strong and empowered as a tall person.
Yeah. Anybody got any closing remarks? We are 5 minutes over time.
I just wanted to say, whose imagination again, Professor? I know you can't say it because it's your live, but I'm just a student here and I can say what I need to say and you get what I'm talking about. Exactly.
Stop stirring the pot, Melanie, please.
No.
No. Any closing remarks? Anybody else? All right. If not, thank y'all for saying y'all enjoyed class. I enjoyed it too. I was thinking like, yo, we only got a few more books left, and I was like, dang, that's gonna end the semester. But then I was like, should we start another Black sci-fi writing? And I was like, probably not, because this was been a Butler class. Like, I was thinking about the ending of this class the other day, and I was like, yeah, we're coming to an end swiftly. We got to start another. But next
If you
week,
need suggestions, I have them. So
yeah, I was really thinking about Broken Earth trilogy. What's her name? Nindy? No, what's her name? Broken.
Kay Jemison, I just finished
Kay
it.
Jemison.
It's so good. Let's start it.
I was
We got to
thinking,
get our cart with that one too.
I was thinking about reading that
okay,
trilogy.
Jemison.
N.K. Jemisin, yeah. But we'll see, because this is labor, y'all. This is labor. Look. But anyway, next week we start Imago. The page breakdowns are on the Substack. I am about to drop an article on the free side of the Substack tonight because I want to wrap up this section and finish thinking about Reagan through some writing real quick. But if not, I will see y'all next Wednesday. Happy 4th of July, whatever, if y'all celebrate it or not. Be safe, eat some barbecue, have some drinks, do whatever you're going to do. And I'll see y'all back next week. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna think more critically, more seriously about starting another author. I will think about that. Because I do enjoy this space that we hold. And I do think it is beneficial for all of us to come together and read as a community. So I will be thinking about that a little bit more if I have the bandwidth for it. But yeah, if not, I'll see y'all next week. Good night, y'all. Thanks for the participation tonight. This was great. Bye.